For 20 years I had watched humanity lose. My name is Commander Kyle, and I serve the Zorvian Empire as the captain of the warship Vraxian. I had fought in more battles than I could remember. I had seen human planets fall, human stations burn, and human ships disappear from our scanners one after another. At first we feared humanity. They were strange creatures compared to the other species in the galaxy. They were not the strongest, not the fastest, and not the most advanced. But they refused to stop fighting. Every time we pushed them back, they returned. Every time we destroyed one of their fleets, another appeared somewhere else. For years, our leaders told us that humanity was dangerous because they did not know when to give up. But eventually, even that strange strength seemed to disappear. Human worlds became silent, their fleets became smaller, their signals became weaker. One by one, their planets stopped answering our calls. We believed they were finally finished. On the day everything changed, I was standing inside the main command room of the Vraxian, looking at the largest star map in the Zorvian fleet. The map showed thousands of stars across the galaxy. Most of the human worlds were marked with red symbols. Red meant destroyed. Black meant abandoned. Only a few blue symbols remained. Those were the last human systems still sending signals. My officers stood around me while the High Council sent us an official message. The message was short. Humanity is no longer a threat. I read those words twice. After 20 years of war, the galaxy had finally reached the end. The human species had been pushed back to only a handful of worlds. Their strongest fleets were gone. Their greatest cities were silent. Their armies had stopped sending distress calls. Even their famous human commanders had disappeared. One of my officers smiled and said, "Commander, it is over." I wanted to believe him. I really did. I looked at the star map and felt something I had not felt in many years: relief. For the first time, I thought maybe the war was truly finished. Maybe we could finally return home. Maybe our children would grow up without hearing stories about human attacks. Maybe humanity had finally accepted defeat. Then, something strange happened. One of the blue stars on the map suddenly disappeared. I looked at it in confusion. "What happened to that system?" I asked. My sensor officer quickly checked the data. "Nothing, Commander. It may be a map error." "Check it again." He checked the system 3 times. The result was the same. The human star was gone. Not destroyed, not damaged, just gone. There was no explosion, no warning, no energy wave. Nothing. I stepped closer to the display. "Show me the original sensor data." The officer brought it up. The star was there 1 second, and then it was not. I felt a strange pressure in my chest. "Run another scan." The sensors scanned the area again. The star appeared on the screen for less than a second. Then it vanished. My officers became quiet. Before I could say anything, another star disappeared from the map. Then another. Then another. The command room became completely silent. I stared at the map as more blue points began disappearing. One after another, the last human systems seemed to vanish into the darkness. "Are they destroying their own systems?" someone asked. "No," I replied. I did not know why I said it. I simply knew something was wrong. A star cannot disappear like that. I ordered every sensor on the Vraxian to scan the surrounding space. The results made no sense. There was no explosion, no new energy source, no weapon signal. Nothing. Then my sensor officer suddenly stood up. His face had changed. He looked afraid. "Commander." I turned toward him. "What is it?" He pointed at the screen. "I found something." A large section of empty space appeared on the display. At first I saw nothing. Then the computer increased the light level. A shadow appeared. It was so large that my mind could not understand what I was looking at. It was not a planet. It was not an asteroid. It was not a normal ship. It was something enormous moving silently between the stars. "Magnify it," I ordered. The image became clearer. I felt the air leave my lungs. I knew that shape. I had seen it in old battle records. I had seen it in reports from 20 years ago. I had watched ships like it destroy entire Zorvian formations. It was a human battleship, but that was impossible. Every ship of that class had been destroyed. Every human battleship was supposed to be gone. "Commander," my officer whispered, "the object has no engine signal." I stared at the screen. "Then how is it moving?" He had no answer. The ship continued forward without sound, without light, and without any visible engine. It moved directly between the stars, making them disappear behind its massive body. Suddenly, I understood what had been happening. The stars were not disappearing. Something was moving in front of them. Something had been hiding in the darkness. I ordered the fleet to prepare for combat. Thousands of weapons turned toward the unknown ship, but the human battleship did not attack. It simply stopped. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then our communication system activated by itself. No one had opened the channel. No one had requested contact. A single human voice filled the command room. It was calm, almost too calm. "You thought we were gone." Every officer looked at me. I could not speak. The voice continued. "You thought the war was over." I stepped closer to the screen. "Who are you?" I asked. There was a long silence. Then the human answered with only 5 words. "We were only waiting." The communication ended. At that exact moment, hundreds of new shapes appeared behind the first human battleship. My sensor officer stopped breathing for a second. I looked at the screen, unable to believe what I was seeing. 1 ship became 10, 10 became 100. Then the computer began, showing thousands of unknown objects. They were coming out of the darkness. They had been there the entire time. And for the first time in 20 years, I felt something I had never expected to feel again. Fear. Because humanity was not gone. Humanity had been waiting in the dark. I could not move. I stood in the command room and watched the stars disappear behind the massive shapes on our screen. A few minutes earlier, I had believed the war was over. Now I was looking at something that could change the entire history of the galaxy. My officers were shouting orders, but their voices sounded far away. I could only hear the steady sound of my own breathing. Thousands of human ships were appearing from the darkness, but none of them were showing a normal engine signal. They were simply there, as if space itself had hidden them from us. I ordered every sensor on the Vraxian to scan the nearest human ship. The computer returned the same message again and again. No active engine, no heat trail, no communication source, no clear power signal. It was almost as if the ship was dead. But I knew it was not dead. Something that large could not appear beside an entire fleet by accident. "Commander, should we fire?" my weapons officer asked. I looked at the screen. The human ship was still doing nothing. It was not moving toward us. It was not charging its weapons. It was simply watching. "No," I said. "Do not fire." My officers looked at me in surprise. "But, Commander, they have surrounded us." "I know." I kept watching the ship. "That is why we do not fire." I had spent 20 years fighting humans. I knew their habits. Human commanders were often bold, sometimes reckless, and almost always difficult to predict. But this was different. There was no anger in their movements, no panic, no rush. They had every reason to attack us, yet they were waiting. That made me more nervous than any weapon could have. I ordered our long-range sensors to search the area around the fleet. At first, the computer showed nothing. Then a small warning appeared. One hidden object had been detected behind us. I turned toward the display. "How far?" I asked. "Too close," the sensor officer replied. "It was inside our detection range before we found it." My stomach tightened. "How many?" He scanned again. His face became pale. "1." I almost felt relieved. One hidden ship was not enough to destroy our fleet. Then he looked at me again. "Commander, another object has appeared. A second signal appeared, then a third, then 10, then 50. I watched the numbers rise. The hidden objects were not arriving. They had already been there. Our sensors were simply becoming capable of seeing them. I suddenly understood the meaning of the disappearing stars. The human fleet was not traveling through normal space like our ships. It was using the darkness itself as cover. Their ships were painted in materials that reflected almost no light. Their engines stayed cold for long periods. Their systems were almost completely silent. They had learned how to become part of the space around them. We had spent years searching for human ships by looking for movement, heat, and energy. The humans had simply stopped giving us anything to find. "How long have they been hiding?" I asked. Nobody answered. I turned toward the science officer. "How long?" He looked at the data. "Commander, based on the age of some of the signals, these ships may have been here for decades." Decades. The word hit me harder than any weapon. These ships had been hiding while we believed humanity was dying. We had been celebrating every human defeat while their survivors were quietly building something in the dark. I looked at the main screen again. The largest human battleship was still there. I wanted to know who was controlling it. "Open a communication channel," I ordered. My officer tried. Nothing happened. He tried again. Still nothing. Then, without warning, the screen turned black. A human face appeared. It was an older man with tired eyes and short grey hair. He did not look angry. He did not look excited. He simply looked at me. "Commander Kale," he said. I froze. "You know my name?" I asked. "We know much more than your name." His voice was calm. "Who are you?" I asked. The man paused for a moment. "My name is Daniel Ward. I am the last commander of the human survival fleet." I looked around the room. None of my officers spoke. The man continued. "You have spent 20 years searching for our fleet." "And you were hiding here?" I asked. "Not here," he said. "Everywhere." I felt a cold feeling move through me. "Why didn't you attack us?" I asked. Daniel looked toward his side for a moment, as if someone had spoken to him. Then he looked back at me. "Because this was never about attacking you." "Then what is it about?" I asked. He gave me a strange answer. "Survival." I did not understand. He explained that after the first years of the war, human leaders realized something the rest of the galaxy did not understand. Humanity could not win a long war against the Zorvian Empire by using the same rules. We had more ships, more worlds, more resources. So the humans changed the rules. They stopped trying to protect everything. They started protecting what mattered most. Small groups of humans were moved to hidden worlds. Old ships were rebuilt. New ships were created in secret. Entire colonies were taught how to live without outside help. They learned to grow food underground. They learned to build machines with simple parts. They learned to survive without large power stations. Most importantly, they learned patience. "You destroyed our cities," Daniel said. "You destroyed our fleets. You destroyed many of our worlds. But every time you thought you were winning, another group of humans was moving deeper into the darkness." I wanted to reject his words, but I could not. The evidence was in front of me. Thousands of ships were surrounding us. "Why reveal yourselves now?" I asked. Daniel looked at me for several seconds. Then he said, "Because you finally made the mistake we were waiting for." My eyes moved toward the main galaxy map. "What mistake?" I asked. Daniel did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked behind me, toward the large display showing the Zorvian Empire. Then he said quietly, "You brought your entire fleet here." I felt my heart stop for a moment. I turned toward the map. Almost every major Zorvian warship was in this system. We had come here because we believed the last human fleet was trapped. We believed this would be the final battle. But now I saw the truth. We had gathered almost all our military power in one place. We had left huge parts of the Empire with very little protection. Daniel smiled slightly. "Commander Kyle," he said, "you came looking for the last humans." The screen behind him changed. A new map appeared. Thousands of small human symbols covered the galaxy. Hidden colonies, hidden stations, hidden ships, hidden worlds. My officers stared at the map in complete silence. Daniel looked directly into my eyes. "You found us." He paused. "But you still don't know where we all are." The transmission ended. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then our long-range sensor began making a strange sound. One signal appeared outside the system, then another, then hundreds. My sensor officer looked at me with wide eyes. "Commander." I turned toward him. "What now?" He pointed at the screen. "The human ships are moving." I watched the display as thousands of human ships slowly changed direction. They were not moving toward our fleet. They were moving past us. All of them were heading toward one place, the center of the Zorvian Empire. And then I understood something that made my blood run cold. We had not discovered the human fleet. The human fleet had allowed us to discover it. I watched the human fleet move toward the center of the Zorvian Empire, and for the first time in my life, I had no idea what my enemy was planning. I had spent 20 years studying human tactics, but everything I knew about them suddenly felt useless. We had always believed humans fought because they were emotional. We thought they attacked when they were angry and retreated when they were afraid. We thought their greatest weakness was that they cared too much about their people. We were wrong. As thousands of human ships moved through the darkness, our fleet remained silent. No weapons were fired. No alarms sounded from the human ships. They simply moved with perfect order. It was almost peaceful, and that frightened me more than an attack would have. I ordered my officers to track every ship. "How many?" I asked. The sensor officer looked at his screen. "We have confirmed 12,000, Commander." I stared at him. 12,000? He nodded. "And the number is still increasing." My chest became tight. 12,000 ships was more than the entire human fleet we believed had existed before the war. We had destroyed thousands of human ships over the years. We had seen their largest battleships explode. We had watched their fleets retreat. We had captured human commanders and searched their records. Yet somehow, these ships had been built without us knowing. I asked the science officer how that was possible. He opened a long list of reports. "They built them. Slowly," he said. "Very slowly. Some of these ships are more than 20 years old." "Where?" I asked. He looked at the data. "We don't know." "Then find out." He tried. For almost 10 minutes, our systems searched the hidden fleet. Then he shook his head. "Commander, we can't trace their origin." "Why?" "Because they have no normal production signatures. Their parts were made in different places. Some systems were built on planets. Some were built in space. Some parts were even made from old human ships." I looked at the screen again. The humans had taken everything they had, left and turned it into something new. Broken ships had become new ships. Old machines had become new machines. Lost colonies had become hidden factories. Even their failures had become part of their survival plan. I suddenly remembered something from the early years of the war. A human world called Arvin 3 had surrendered without a fight. We had entered the system and found empty cities. There were no soldiers, no military bases, no resistance. We thought the people had escaped in fear. Now I wondered if that had been the plan. I remembered another world where the human population had vanished before our fleet arrived. Another station where every computer had been destroyed. Another colony where we found only empty buildings and old human flags. At the time, we thought humanity was running away. Now I realized they had been leaving behind nothing we could use. They were disappearing one piece at a time. I asked my science officer to compare the locations of every abandoned human world with the current human fleet positions. He worked for several minutes. Then he looked at me. "Commander, there is a pattern." "Show me." He placed the old human worlds on the map. One by one, lines appeared between them. The lines formed a huge network across the galaxy. Hidden routes, secret supply paths, places where human ships could travel without being seen. "They planned this years ago," he whispered. I felt a strange weight inside me. We had spent 20 years believing that humanity was reacting to us, but humanity had not been reacting. They had been planning. They had been watching us. Every battle had given them information. Every attack had shown them our methods. Every mistake we made had become another lesson for them. I asked to speak with Daniel Ward again. The communication opened almost immediately. His face appeared on the screen. "You understand now," he said. "Not everything," I replied. "Then ask. Why didn't you use this fleet before?" He looked away for a moment. "Because we were not ready." "You had thousands of ships. Ships are not enough." His answer surprised me. "Then what were you waiting for?" He looked directly at me. "Time." I remained silent. Daniel explained that humanity had learned something during the first years of the war. Building a powerful fleet was not enough to survive. If humans wanted to live after the war, they needed more than weapons. They needed food systems that could work without outside support. They needed clean water systems. They needed energy sources that could last for decades. They needed ships that could repair themselves. They needed people who could live without seeing another human city for years. So they built everything slowly. They created hidden colonies in places our maps showed as empty. They built small farms. Inside asteroids, they stored seeds, medicine, machines, and knowledge. They taught children how to repair simple systems. They trained pilots to fly without normal navigation signals. They even created ships that could shut down almost every system and remain hidden for decades. "You built a civilization inside the darkness," I said. Daniel nodded. "We had to." "Why?" I asked. His face became serious. "Because you wanted us to disappear." I did not answer. He continued. "So we learned how to disappear." His words stayed in my mind. The Zorvian Empire had always believed survival came from power. Bigger fleets, stronger weapons, more worlds, more soldiers. Humans had chosen something different. They had chosen to become difficult to find, difficult to predict, difficult to destroy. That was their real strength. I asked Daniel where his fleet was going. He did not answer. Instead, he sent me a map. The map showed the center of our empire. I stared at it. "What is this?" I asked. "A warning," he said. "For whom?" "Everyone." The human fleet continued moving. But something strange happened. They began splitting into smaller groups. Some ships moved toward the outer systems. Others disappeared into deep space. Others turned toward old Zorvian military routes. I realized they were not simply moving as one fleet. They were spreading across the empire. "What are they doing?" I asked. Daniel answered calmly. "Showing you how much we learned." My officers began reporting strange events. Human signals appeared near old Zorvian supply routes. Hidden ships were detected near communication stations. Small human vessels appeared near distant planets and disappeared before our patrols could reach them. No attacks, no destruction, just presence. They were showing us that they could reach almost anywhere. Then one of our officers rushed into the command room. "Commander, we have a problem." I turned toward him. "What happened?" "The central military network is offline." I froze. "How?" "We don't know." Another officer shouted, "Commander, the Western network is also offline." Then another report arrived. "Eastern communication is gone." I looked at the galaxy map. One by one, the Zorvian military systems were turning dark. I contacted Daniel. "Did you do this?" He looked at me quietly. "No." His answer shocked me. "Then who did?" He paused. "You still don't understand." "Understand what?" Daniel leaned closer to the camera. "The fleet you can see is not the whole fleet." My heart began beating faster. "What does that mean?" He did not answer. Behind him, another human officer whispered something into his ear. Daniel looked at the information and then back at me. "Commander Kyle," he said, "you are about to see why humanity survived." The screen went black. At that exact moment, every light on the Vraxion flickered. Our main display went dark. Then one small message appeared in the center of the screen. It was written in simple human language. "We were never gone." I stared at those words while another message appeared beneath them. "We were everywhere." I stared at the words on the screen for several seconds. We were everywhere. I could not understand what I was seeing. The command room was almost completely dark, and most of our systems were still offline. Around me, officers were trying to restart the communication network, but nothing worked. For the first time since I became a commander, I felt completely blind. We had always been the ones watching others. We had the strongest sensors, the largest military network, and the most advanced tracking systems in the known galaxy. Yet now we could not even see what was happening around our own ship. I ordered the emergency systems to activate. Slowly, a few displays came back online. The galaxy map appeared. Again, but it looked nothing like it had before. Large parts of the map were dark. Our military stations had stopped sending signals. Our supply routes were silent. Even some of our closest patrol ships were no longer responding. I turned to my communications officer. "Can you contact the High Command?" He tried several channels. Nothing. "Try the emergency channel." He tried again. Still nothing. "Commander," he said quietly, "we are completely cut off." I looked toward the main window. Outside, thousands of stars filled the darkness. Somewhere among those stars were human ships, but now I understood that the ships we could see were only a small part of what humanity had prepared. The thought was almost impossible to accept. I ordered the fleet to move back toward the Zorvian capital. We needed to protect our homeworld. We needed to warn the High Council. But before we could move, the sensors detected something strange. A human ship had appeared directly in front of us. It was smaller than the great battleships we had seen before. It had no visible weapons. It did not move. I opened a communication channel. Daniel Ward appeared again. "Commander Kale," he said, "you should stop trying to contact your leaders." "Why?" I asked. "Because they already know." "Know what?" "That the war is over." I felt anger rise inside me. "You have not won anything." Daniel did not react. "That is not what I said." I stared at him. "Then what are you saying?" He looked at me with a calm expression. "We are not here to destroy the Zorvian Empire." His words confused me. "Then why have you surrounded us?" "Because we want you to understand something." "What?" He leaned closer to the screen. "You cannot destroy us anymore." The communication ended. I sat silently for a moment. His words were simple, but they carried more weight than any threat. We had spent 20 years trying to destroy humanity. We had believed that if we removed enough human worlds, ships, and soldiers, the species would eventually disappear. But humanity had changed the meaning of survival. They no longer needed hundreds of planets. They no longer needed large cities or giant military bases. They could survive with hidden colonies, small communities, and ships that could remain silent for years. We had been fighting an enemy that kept changing while we stayed the same. Then, our sensor officer, suddenly, shouted, "Commander!" I turned toward him. "What now?" He pointed at the screen. "We are detecting movement near the stars." I looked at the display. At first, I saw nothing. Then the computer increased the image. A dark shape appeared between 2 stars. Then another appeared. Then 5 more. I ordered the sensors to scan the entire area. The results were impossible. Hundreds of human ships were appearing in places that had looked completely empty only seconds earlier. Some were close to our fleet. Others were far away. Some were near old Zorvian stations. Others were around planets we thought were completely safe. I watched as the human ships appeared one by one. It felt as if the darkness itself was opening its eyes. "How are they doing this?" I asked. My science officer looked at the data. "Their ships are not using normal travel methods." "Explain." "They are hiding their energy, output. They are using the background radiation of space to cover their signals. Their outer hulls absorb light instead of reflecting it." I stared at him. "So they can sit near a star and we would never see them?" "Yes." "For how long?" He checked the data. "Possibly years." I felt a cold feeling in my chest. Years. That meant some of the human ships could have been watching us for years without us knowing. They could have been sitting outside our military bases. They could have been following our fleets. They could have been listening to our communications. They could have watched us move troops across the galaxy while remaining completely invisible. We had thought our military plans were secret. Now I wondered how much humanity already knew. I asked the science officer to check the oldest human ship we could detect. He gave me the information. The ship had been hiding in deep space for 19 years. 19 years. I stared at the number. "What was it doing all this time?" I asked. "Waiting," he replied. That word again. Waiting. It seemed to follow humanity everywhere. They had waited while their worlds fell. They had waited while their fleets disappeared. They had waited while the galaxy believed them dead. They had waited until we became confident. And now they were moving. I opened the human communication channel again. Daniel answered almost immediately. "Why did you hide for so long?" I asked. "Because we learned something from you," he said. "What?" "You always looked for the strongest target." I did not understand. He continued. "When we showed strength, you attacked us. When we built large fleets, you destroyed them. When we defended our worlds, you surrounded them. So we stopped showing strength." I looked at the hidden ships on my screen. "You became invisible." "Exactly. And now?" Daniel looked toward something outside the camera. "Now we no longer need to hide." I felt a strange fear. "What are you going to do?" He looked directly at me. "We are going home." "Earth?" I asked. Daniel shook his head. "Not just Earth." He sent me a new map. My eyes widened as the map opened. Thousands of human symbols appeared across the galaxy. Hidden colonies, hidden stations, hidden fleets. Human communities existed in places our empire had never even searched. Some were inside cold moons. Some were deep under planets. Some were hidden in asteroid fields. Some were aboard giant ships moving slowly between distant stars. Humanity had not been living on one last world. It had become a network spread across the galaxy. We had spent 20 years hunting a single target. But there was no single target anymore. Humanity had become too large to erase. Then Daniel sent one final message. "Commander Kyle, your empire made one mistake." "Which one?" I asked. His answer was quiet. "You thought humanity needed a planet to survive." The screen went dark. Before I could respond, a new signal appeared on our main display. It came from beyond the outer edge of the empire. Then another signal appeared. Then hundreds. Then thousands. The human fleet was moving again. But this time, they were not surrounding our ships. They were heading toward the center of the Zorvian Empire. I watched the map as their paths slowly formed a giant circle around our capital. Then my sensor officer whispered the words I never wanted to hear. "Commander, there are human ships behind the capital." I turned toward him. "How many?" He looked at the screen for several seconds. "I don't know." "Why not?" His hands were shaking. "Because they are still appearing." I looked at the galaxy map. Human ships were emerging from the darkness on every side, thousands of them, maybe millions. And suddenly I understood the truth. The fleet we had feared was not coming. It was already here. I could not stop looking at the galaxy map. Human ships were appearing on every side of the Zorvian Empire, but they were not attacking. They were simply taking positions around important systems. Every time one of our officers tried to track them, another group disappeared from our sensors. It was like trying to count shadows in a dark room. For the first time, I understood that the human fleet was not just a military force. It was a system. Every ship knew where the others were. Every colony had a purpose. Every hidden station was connected to another hidden station. Humanity had spent years building something much larger than a fleet, and we had never noticed it. I contacted Daniel Ward again. His face appeared on my screen. I wanted answers. "How many humans are still alive?" I asked. Daniel remained silent for a moment. "Enough," he finally said. "That is not an answer." "It is the only answer you need right now." I became angry. "You have surrounded my empire. You have hidden ships near our worlds. You have cut our military network. You expect me to believe you do not want a war?" Daniel shook his head. "No, we do not want another war." "Then why are you doing this?" I asked. His eyes became serious. "Because we learned what happens when you trust an enemy to leave you alone." His words made me think about the first year of the war. I remembered our first attack on a human colony. At that time, we believed humans would surrender after losing one world. They did not. Then we destroyed another. They still fought. We destroyed their largest fleet. They rebuilt it. We destroyed their main military station. They moved their command center. We thought they were simply stubborn. We never understood what they were learning. Daniel opened a file and sent it to my screen. It showed old human records from the first days of the war. The files were simple. They showed maps, numbers, supply records, and notes written by human commanders. I read one sentence again and again. If we cannot stop them, we must learn to survive them. Daniel explained that this sentence became the foundation of the human survival plan. Humanity stopped asking how to defeat the Zorvian Empire. Instead, they asked a different question. How could a human child survive if the Empire destroyed every human city? How could a small group survive if communication with Earth was lost? How could a colony survive without trade? How could a ship survive for 10 years without returning to a major station? How could human knowledge survive if every computer network was destroyed? They started solving those problems one by one. Small colonies were built in hidden places. Each colony had food systems, water systems, medical rooms, repair tools, and energy sources. They learned to produce what they needed instead of waiting for supplies. Human engineers built machines that could repair other machines. They built ships with simple backup systems. If the main computer failed, the crew could still operate the ship. If the main engine stopped, the ship could wait. If communication failed, the ship could continue its mission without outside orders. If a colony lost contact with the rest of humanity, it could continue living alone. I looked at Daniel. You were preparing for the Empire to destroy everything. He nodded. Yes. And you expected to lose? He shook his head. No. We expected to survive. That difference stayed in my mind. We had always believed survival meant winning. Humans had learned that survival could mean something else. It could mean refusing to disappear. Daniel showed me images of human colonies hidden inside places we had ignored. One colony was built beneath the surface of a frozen moon. Another existed inside a huge asteroid. Another was hidden behind the bright light of a star. Some human communities lived aboard ships that had not visited a planet in more than 15 years. These people were not soldiers. They were farmers, engineers, teachers, doctors, builders, parents, and children. Humanity had not only built a hidden fleet, it had built a hidden life. Why show me this? I asked. Daniel looked at me. Because you need to understand what you are facing. Your fleet? No. He shook his head. Our people. I became silent. Daniel continued. You can destroy a ship. You can destroy a city. You can destroy a planet. But if there are still humans somewhere, humanity continues. His words were simple, but I knew they were true. The Zorvian Empire had spent 20 years destroying things. We had counted victories by the number of human ships we defeated and the number of human worlds we captured. But we had never counted the people who escaped. We had never counted the knowledge they carried. We had never counted the skills they learned. We had never counted the children who grew up knowing that their species had to survive. Then Daniel showed me something that shocked me even more. It was a human shipyard. It was hidden inside a dead star system. Thousands of human workers were building new ships. The shipyard was larger than some of our military stations. How long has this been here? I asked. 16 years. I stared at the image. And we never found it. You never looked there. Why? Daniel smiled slightly. Because you believed dead space had no value. I looked at the shipyard again. The humans had turned places we ignored into places where they could survive. They had learned to use empty space, broken planets, old ships, and forgotten systems. They had taken everything we considered useless and turned it into something valuable. That was when I finally understood the true human advantage. It was not one weapon. It was not one great commander. It was not even their hidden fleet. It was their ability to use what they had. They could lose almost everything and still build again. I asked Daniel what would happen if the Empire attacked the human fleet now. He looked at me for a long moment. You would lose. His answer was calm. Because you have more ships? I asked. No. Then why? Because you are still fighting the war we started 20 years ago. I frowned. What does that mean? Daniel explained that our military still depended on large command centers, central networks, supply stations, and fixed bases. If we lost those systems, our fleet would become slower and less effective. Humans had removed those weaknesses from their own system. Their ships could operate alone. Their colonies could survive alone. Their commanders could make decisions without waiting for a central order. Their entire civilization had been designed so that losing one part would not destroy the rest. "You built a civilization that cannot be killed with one attack," I said. "Exactly," Daniel replied. Then he became quiet. I noticed something in his expression. He looked tired. Not afraid, not angry, just tired. "Commander," I asked, "what happened to Earth?" His eyes changed when I said the name. "Earth is still there." My heart stopped. "You mean Earth survived?" He nodded. "But you said the human worlds were destroyed." "Most were." "Then why did you never defend Earth?" Daniel looked at me and said, "Because Earth was never our final home." I did not understand. "What does that mean?" He did not answer. Instead, he sent me one final file. I opened it. A picture appeared on the screen. It showed a massive structure hidden beyond a distant star system. It was larger than any human ship I had ever seen. It looked almost like a small world made by machines. Thousands of lights covered its surface. Daniel spoke quietly. "This is the last part of the survival plan." I stared at the structure. "What is it?" Daniel looked directly at me. "The place where humanity will live if the galaxy falls again." I could barely breathe. Before I could ask another question, our sensors suddenly detected a huge energy signal coming from beyond the outer edge of the Empire. Every officer in the command room turned toward the display. A shape began appearing in the darkness. It was larger than any human battleship, much larger. Even Daniel became silent when he saw it. Then he said something that I will never forget. "Commander Kale," his voice was no longer calm, "that ship was never supposed to wake up." The communication ended. I stared into the darkness as the enormous shape slowly moved toward us. For the first time, I realized that even the humans might be afraid of what they had built. And then I understood the most terrifying truth of all. The human fleet was not the final weapon. Something much bigger was still sleeping in the darkness. I stood frozen in the command room as the enormous shape continued moving through the darkness. I had seen thousands of human ships during the last few hours, but this was different. The object was so large that our sensors could not measure its full size. At first I thought it was a planet. Then our science officer checked the readings and slowly shook his head. "Commander, it is not a planet." "Then what is it?" I asked. He looked at the screen again. "It is artificial." Nobody spoke after that. An artificial structure that large should have been impossible. Even the Zorvian Empire had never built anything close to it. I opened the human communication channel. I needed Daniel Ward to explain what we were seeing. The screen stayed black for several seconds. Then Daniel appeared. He looked different this time. His face was serious. "You see it now," he said. "What is that?" I asked. He took a slow breath. "The Ark. You called it the final part of the survival plan." "Yes." "Why did you say it was never supposed to wake up?" Daniel looked towards someone outside the camera. "Because the Ark was built for a future we hoped would never come." I stared at him. "What future?" "A future where humanity had nowhere left to live." I looked at the enormous structure again. Thousands of small lights were moving across its surface. It was not empty. It was alive. "How many people are inside?" I asked. Daniel did not answer immediately. "Millions." I felt my eyes widen. Millions of humans had been living inside that structure while the galaxy believed humanity was almost gone. Families had been living there. Children had been born there. Scientists had worked there. Engineers had spent years preparing for a future they might never see. The Ark was not simply a ship. It was a moving human world. It carried farms, hospitals, schools, factories, power systems, libraries, and everything needed for a civilization to continue. I suddenly understood why the human fleet had been so quiet. They were not protecting a military base. They were protecting a future. "Why are you showing it to me now?" I asked. Daniel looked at the main display. "Because the galaxy needs to see it." "Why?" "Because for 20 years, your empire told everyone that humanity was almost dead." He paused. "We want the truth to be known." The Ark continued moving toward the center of the empire. Its surface opened in several places, revealing hundreds of smaller human ships. They moved around it like a protective wall. The sight was impossible to describe. It looked like a small galaxy traveling through space. I ordered my officers to send a message to the High Council. "Tell them everything," I said. My communication officer tried. Nothing happened. "The network is still offline, Commander. Use the old emergency system." "It is not responding." I looked at Daniel. "You cut us off." He shook his head. "Not completely." "Then who did?" "Your own system did." "What does that mean?" Daniel explained that our military network had become too dependent on one central system. When human ships entered our communication zones, they did not destroy the network. They simply forced it to shut down by making the system believe there were too many false signals. Our own security systems had locked themselves. The humans had not broken the door. They had simply convinced the door that it was safer to close. I could not help but respect the simplicity of it. They had not used some magical weapon. They had studied how our system worked and found its weakness. Again, their greatest strength was not power. It was understanding. Then something happened that changed everything. A new signal appeared across every open channel. It was not from the human fleet. It was from the Zorvian High Council. The message was short. "All fleets, return to the capital immediately. Humanity has been detected in more than 600 systems." My officers looked at each other. 600 systems. I opened the galaxy map. Red warning symbols were appearing everywhere. Human ships had been detected near our major military bases. They were near fuel stations, communication centers, shipyards, and border systems. But still, there was no attack. The humans were simply there. The High Council sent another message. "Do not engage." I almost laughed. For 20 years, the Council had ordered us to attack humanity. Now they were telling us not to fight. Then a third message arrived. "Begin peace negotiations." The command room became silent. I looked at Daniel. "You wanted this?" He shook his head. "No." "Then why did they surrender?" "Because they finally understand." "Understand what?" Daniel looked at me. "That humanity cannot be erased." I looked at the galaxy map again. The truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Human ships were everywhere. Human colonies existed in places we had never searched. The Ark carried millions of people. Their hidden fleet was larger than we could count. And even if we destroyed every visible human ship, we still would not know how many hidden colonies remained. Humanity had made itself impossible to remove with one attack. Then Daniel said something I did not expect. "Commander Kale, I need you to do something." "What?" "Look, outside." I walked toward the main observation window. At first I saw only stars. Then the darkness began to change. One human ship appeared, then another, then hundreds. They were not hiding anymore. Their lights were on. Their engines were visible. Their ships were showing themselves to the galaxy. I watched as more human vessels emerged from the darkness. Some were old battleships, some were new ships, some were tiny transport vessels. Others were enormous colony ships. There were medical ships, farming ships, repair ships, research ships, and rescue ships. It was not an army. It was a civilization. For 20 years, we had seen only the weapons of humanity. Now, for the first time, we were seeing the people behind those weapons. A human transport ship passed near our fleet. I saw small lights inside its windows. People were awake. Children were moving through the ship. Families were looking out at the stars. I suddenly remembered all the human worlds we had destroyed. I remembered the empty cities, the abandoned stations, the silent colonies. I had never thought about the people who had escaped. I had only counted the victory. Daniel's voice came through the communication system. "Do you see them?" "Yes," I whispered. "Those are the people we were trying to destroy. Those are the people who survived." I felt something change inside me. For 20 years, I had believed humans survived because they were stubborn. Now I understood it was more than that. They survived because they adapted. They changed their homes. They changed their ships. They changed their plans. They changed their way of thinking. But they never changed one thing. They never stopped being human. Then the human fleet sent a message across the galaxy. Every major civilization received it. Daniel's voice filled the communication networks. "To every species listening, we are humanity. We know what fear looks like. We know what it means to lose a home. We know what it means to watch your world disappear. We are not asking you to fear us. We are asking you to understand us." The galaxy became silent. Daniel continued. "We could have used our fleet to destroy your worlds. We chose not to. We could have attacked your capital. We chose not to. We could have taken revenge for everything we lost. We chose another path." I looked at the human ships surrounding us. They had the power to attack, but they were not attacking. They were giving the galaxy a choice. Daniel's final words were simple. "We want to live. We want our children to live. And we will never again allow anyone to decide that humanity has no right to exist." The message ended. For several seconds, there was complete silence across the galaxy. Then one alien government sent a reply. "We recognize humanity as a surviving civilization." Another followed. "We request peace." Then another. "We request a meeting." One after another, civilizations that had once ignored humanity began sending messages. The galaxy was changing in front of me. But then I noticed something strange. The Ark had stopped moving. All human ships around it stopped as well. Daniel appeared on my screen again. His face was calm, but there was something behind his eyes. "What happened?" I asked. He looked at the Ark. "We received a signal." "From where?" He hesitated. "Beyond the outer galaxy." My skin became cold. "What kind of signal?" Daniel looked at me. "A human signal." "From another human colony?" "No." "Then where?" He took a breath. "From Earth." I stared at him. "Earth is alive?" "Yes." "But you told me Earth was not your final home." "It wasn't." "Then what is there?" Daniel did not answer. The communication ended. Seconds later, every human ship around us turned toward the same direction. The Ark changed course. Thousands of ships followed. The entire fleet began moving away from the center of the Empire. I watched the galaxy map as they traveled toward a distant system that had been marked as dead for 20 years. Earth. For the first time in decades, humanity was going home. But something about Daniel's silence worried me. If Earth was alive, why had humanity hidden it for so long? And why had the Ark received a signal from there only now? Then my sensor officer suddenly shouted, "Commander!" I turned toward him. "What is it?" He pointed at the screen. A signal was coming from the direction of Earth. It was weak, old, and repeating the same message again and again. My officer translated it. The words appeared on the display. "If you can hear this, do not come alone." I stared at the message. Daniel had been calm until that moment. Now, for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. He looked at me and whispered, "Commander Kale, we thought the darkness was hiding us." He paused. "We were wrong." Then, the screen went black. I looked toward the stars ahead of us. Somewhere beyond them was Earth. Somewhere beyond Earth was the answer. And for the first time, I wondered if humanity had been hiding from the galaxy, or if humanity had been hiding from something else. The main lesson of this HFY story is, never underestimate someone because they look weak or defeated. Humanity survived not because it was the strongest, but because humans had patience, courage, intelligence, teamwork, and the ability to adapt. When everything was taken from them, they did not give up. They learned from every failure, changed their strategy, and kept moving forward. The story also teaches that true strength is not always about weapons or power. Sometimes the greatest strength is the ability to survive, learn, stay united, and never lose hope. Final message for the audience. You may think someone is finished because you cannot see them fighting, but sometimes silence does not mean defeat. Sometimes it means they are preparing for their comeback.